Hey, Composing Gloves here, and today we're going to be talking about in this sound and synth basics, the idea of pitch. So in this last video, we talked about sine waves, and it's really super important that we have to understand sine waves. Now we're going to talk about fundamental tones, because guess what? I'm going to just show you something real fast. This tone right here, let's do this. This tone has all these sine waves, right? Which one's the pitch? You know, so that's the idea. So, you know, that is what we would assume is the fundamental tone. So whatever the fundamental tone is, that's going to be our pitch. And you're like, what the heck is this fundamental tone? So we understand that all these things are sine waves, and they have different frequencies, and the way they add up gives us our sound, so the different phases and the different pitches. So that's really great and all, but which one of these is the fundamental tone? Well, that answer would be usually it is the bottom one. It's usually also the loudest one. So we can really have some wonky things happen when we get rid of this fundamental tone. So if we were to filter that bottom one out, and all we're left with is harmonics, weird things happen. So and this is Harmor. I have a whole series on how to use Harmor. But if we detune it, so this frequency moves everything, including this bottom tone, which is almost always the fundamental tone. But if we detune it, if we move the harmonics around, we get really weird things. Versus what we would get if we just moved the whole thing. So quite a different thing going on here, and that's just by moving the pitch of the harmonics, so the sine waves above the fundamental. So when you hear a tone, generally the bottom sine wave is what you would associate with the fundamental. So what is this thing we call pitch? So let's go to a single tone. So it's really easy with a single tone because there's only one tone, so you don't have to determine which one, you know, is the fundamental tone. So let's come over here. And here we have our fundamental tone is one tone. So by definition, it is the fundamental tone. I may be wrong in saying that another tone can be the fundamental. It may always be the lowest one. This is one way to tell if it's a fundamental or not. Okay. So I'm going to cover this in our harmonic series, but I'm saying right here, each one of these, this is a saw wave. Each one of these sine waves you see here, I'm going to call them harmonics, and we'll explain that later. Each one of these harmonics is some sort of ratio to the fundamental tone. So here's our fundamental tone. Let's just say, for example, it's 100 hertz. Well, this one right here then is 200 hertz. So there's a ratio going on here if you're picking up what I'm putting down. So let's talk about this thing. So we have pitch. Pitch is the number of cycles that happen in a second. So we remember from our parts of a waveform that we have these things called cycles. Each one of these cycles is often talked about in terms of hertz. And so it's really important that you know this thing called hertz. So for electronical reasons as well as sound design reasons. I don't know why I think that's so clever, but I thought it was clever for whatever reason. It wasn't that clever. So every time it does one cycle, that's 1 hertz, one completed cycle. And so things are rated in hertz. So if we have a tone of 1 kilohertz, that's 1,000 hertz a second. 10K is often abbreviated as 10 kilohertz, 10,000 cycles a second. And then, of course, 20 hertz, that's the lowest tone a human can hear, a healthy human. So anyways, so when we have one tone oscillating at a rate, that is going to be the pitch. Like, it has to be the pitch. But these other ones over here, we've got these upper tones. They're oscillating at much faster rates. And in this case, they also have volume scaling. Naturally, they would have volume scaling. You can actually get rid of it. But we're used to hearing things with descending amplitude as they go up. And it's also really, really important to the way the phase adds, which is one reason why we're used to hearing it that way. So that's pitch. So we have a fundamental tone. And so if we were to look at this sine wave here, and so I'm going to filter out. So I'm going to remove these top ones, essentially turn the amplitude down to 0 on them so they're not there. And you see we've got nothing. I'm going to unfilter the first one. So there's our first tone. I'm going to capture it as a picture right there, a nice picture. Now I'm going to turn on this EQ. So I'm going to turn on the second tone. I'm going to turn the EQ off, actually. So there's our second tone. Now, anything that's got extra tones is no longer a sine wave, it's something else. But here's our second tone. That's did I turn the EQ off? I did. Okay. And this is after. Okay. So I had to make it a bit louder. Now filters are a whole nother shebangalang thing over there. Dude, they're doing drugs somewhere else. So anyways, as we zoom in here, we see that we no longer have the sine wave. It begins to resemble it'll get closer and closer and closer to the square wave that we talked about earlier because of the way the things add. So this is a really interesting thing. Like, what would it look like? What would the second tone look like? Well, it would look like a sine wave at just slightly faster than this one. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll take this, undo it, and I have this EQ, and I have filtered the living snot out of that first tone, the fundamental. So we should be left with another tone. Now you'll notice that the perceived you perceived the tone on that one. That perceived tone was the fundamental, so that bottom tone. So you said you heard that second tone come in, but you still only heard one sound. See, and as I play it, it becomes even easier to hear it. That is, you are hearing the fundamental. So now this is with it. Let me turn that EQ off. Now you're hearing it as one tone. That I almost did something dumb right there. So you hear one tone, but that's the fundamental tone. So you think you're hearing one tone, just like if we were to, go crazy. You're technically hearing a whole bunch of pitches at the same time, but you only hear the fundamental tone because that's the prevailing pattern. So it gets a little crazy, but so we're gonna go back to our two tones, turn that EQ on, and we've filtered out the fundamental. Whatever, we'll run with that one. It's a separate tone. That's all that matters. And so when we take the EQ back off, so there's our fundamental. Here is our harmonic. Now I've zoomed into them differently, so they're a little askew. This one's actually softer than this one, even though it doesn't look that way. You can see it's slightly faster. So it's important that we note that these things are, being added up. This also adds a lot of validity to what I was saying last time with the whole, you split them up into all these different parts in the sine wave video. So anyways, they get added together and you get that. We have these things, we accept this. We have, this is a separate pitch, and that is the pitch. This bottom one is the pitch I associate with the note. So if you're having problems with things being out of tune, you might want to look at that. So this idea of pitch is hopefully really clear in your head now. Now you get it. So if you have any questions, drop them in the comments, subscribe, and have a blessed day.
Opposing waves. Reversing.